Welcome to tonight's live stream. I'm going to let everybody know that the live stream is getting ready to go on. Just let me get a few minutes and we'll get started on tonight's live stream, which will be talking about dealing with shyness, introversion, and social anxiety in the Goth subculture. Okay, let everybody know that the live stream is going on. And King Thorhammer asks, do I consider myself to be a member of the Goth subculture? I am actually darkly inclined, so I have similar views to many people in the Goth subculture, and I'm a very strong supporter of the Goth subculture. And the reason why I wanted to do this live stream is because of things that I saw as I was doing my research for the 3 books in the Spinsterella trilogy, because over the last 4 or 5 years, as I've been watching videos with many Goth YouTubers, I began to notice a pattern in their behavior in that a lot of Goths, they struggle with shyness, and I could see that in their body language and their facial expressions when a lot of them would make their videos. So I understand that a lot of people in the subculture, they struggle with the issues of shyness, introversion, and social anxiety. And I wanted to do a live stream because a lot of people deal with these struggles, and I wanted them to know that they're not alone in dealing with these struggles, because I myself am a person who is shy, introverted, and deals with social anxiety, and is more comfortable in front of a camera than actually dealing with people. So I know what a lot of kids in the scene are dealing with, and that's something that really needs to be talked about. But I did not see a lot of videos really talking about the issues people deal with. Now, when it comes down to the issue of shyness, shyness is there's actually is 3 different things. Shyness, introversion, and social anxiety are 3 different things. And a lot of people, what they do is they tend to group all 3 into one generalization. But you have to understand that there are people on a spectrum of issues as related to them. So shyness is just a basic fear of being in social groups. So that's the definition of shyness. Now, introversion is very different from shyness. Shyness is a general fear of being in a public group or group setting or interacting with people in a social setting. But introversion is just a natural aversion to social situations, and people who are introverts would rather prefer to be by themselves than in a group of people. Now, when it comes down to a lot of shy people and introverted people, if they have a lot of traumatic experiences when they are interacting in social situations. For example, let's say they have been bullied by kids in school for being too quiet or wanting to be private, or they have very domineering parents who try to push them into social situations. What will happen is a lot of kids, what they will become is socially anxious. And this social anxiety disorder, it's one of those things that winds up coming out of shyness and introversion as it relates to traumas that a lot of kids have. And this is what causes kids to be very anxious when they have to think about being in a social situation and being anxious to the point where they start feeling sick, or they start going into convulsions, or they just literally, you just feel like you just want to mentally shut down because you fear being traumatized as a result of embarrassment that you could possibly experience as a result of a social situation gone wrong. And this is one of the things that people who have social anxiety deal with. They fear getting involved in social situations. They fear getting involved in social interactions, and they fear being humiliated and embarrassed as a result of those situations. So that's why a socially anxious person will try to do everything to avoid a social interaction or any sort of event that relates to social interactions with others, because they fear being humiliated either by a bully or being humiliated by an individual. Now, a lot of people in the Goth subculture, they struggle with shyness, introversion, and social anxiety, and that makes it very difficult for them to have social relationships with others, because when you're a shy person, you are afraid of having interactions with others out of fear that someone may not like you, someone may embarrass you, or someone will be mean to you. So what you're going to do, a lot of shy people do, is they're afraid of going out. And what introverts do when they're in social situations is that they literally start to shut down. And people who are socially anxious, they try to find ways to avoid being in social situations. So these are the three things that they do. The shy person, what they will do is they will become very scared, and a lot of times this fear will turn into anxiety, and this anxiety will really plague a lot of people when it comes down to going out and being about with others. And sometimes people will start creating um, ideas about how many bad scenarios in their head about how things will go, and this will be a major struggle for a lot of kids, because they think that, oh, any sort of social interaction is going to be bad based on past experience or experiences they've had. So they will spend weeks and months just thinking about how bad things are going to be in their head. And others, they will struggle with it, and they will fear going out. And this is one of the things that makes it really bad. But the whole thing is that the whole case of shyness and introversion can evolve into social anxiety, and this can be the thing that can really hamper people's lives when they try to have relationships with others. Well, Bloody Pond. A lot of there aren't goth is not just a bunch of weird white kids. As you stated, goths are people who have a dark view of the world, and they are of all races, all ethnicities, and all religions. There are white Goths, there are black Goths, there are Hispanic Goths, there are Asian Goths, there are Muslim Goths, there are Jewish Goths, there are Goths all over the world. So Gothic subculture is an international subculture, and that's one of the stereotypes people have about the Goth subculture, is believing that it's a white subculture, but in actuality, there has been a black Goth subculture in all across the world ever since its inception in the late 70s. And this is one of the stereotypes people have, but this is a stereotype I refuted in my book, the 3 books of the Spinsterella trilogy. Spinsterella, which was the first book, Spellbound, the second book, and Legendary Mad Matilda. Now, when it comes down to the 3 books of the Spinsterella trilogy, the one that deals heavily with the issue of introversion and shyness was Spellbound. Now, Spellbound was the story of Matilda Crowley's baby bat years, and when she first entered the Goth subculture and became aware of the scene. And in this story, it's all about the Matilda Crowley character learning to deal with her issues of shyness, introversion, and social anxiety, and start to find her voice. And this is something that every Goth should be encouraged to do, is find your voice, because when you speak for yourself, you can let people know what you want and let them know what you need. But introverts, they communicate very differently than the rest of the world. And this is something a lot of people don't understand, because a lot of extroverts, they communicate in a way that is open, whereas introverts, there is a process you have to learn in order to have relationships with them. Because when it comes down to your introvert, they are very private and they don't really let people into their lives unless they trust them. And it can take a long time to earn a introvert's or shy person's trust. And that's a very slow process. And a lot of people, they won't know what signals or tells to look for when a introvert or a shy person is looking to connect with them, because they're looking for people to connect with them in the same way an extrovert does. But an introvert, they have a whole different process of communicating, and they have a whole different process of letting people know how they want to have relationships. Now, the one thing you have to understand about introverts is that the whole process for people who are shy, introverted, and have social anxiety is a lot slower than the process that people who are extroverts have. Now, extroverts, they form personal connections very quickly, whereas introverts, they tend to do things in an extremely slow fashion. The reason why they do things in a slow fashion is because many people who are introverts and shy, what they do is they're thinking about things. Moreover, they are tending to observe people. And because they are observing people, what they want to do is study a person's actions and see what their actions are like before they form relationships with them. So they are studying a person's actions to see what their character is like and if they can trust that person. So that's one of the things that makes them keep their distance from people. And with them being distant, a lot of people will misinterpret a introvert or a shy person's behavior. And a lot of people will think that that person is aloof, or they'll think that that person's conceited. And in the Goth subculture, this is where a lot of people, they misinterpret what people's behavior is like. And a lot of people will start thinking that someone is an elitist, someone is stuck up. And sometimes people are not elitist and stuck up. They just don't know a person. And because they don't know them, they're just going to be keeping their distance. And because an introvert doesn't know someone, what they're going to do is a lot of times be on the defensive. And it's that defensiveness that, and the defensive responses, that can be seen as something negative. However, that's just the way this person is because they don't know you and they don't trust you. Now, this is something that, again, can be misinterpreted. And this is something people on the scene, a lot of people, they'll misinterpret someone. They'll think that that person is a jerk. And some people, maybe they are, but some people are not. They just don't know you. And they are just being defensive because they just don't know you. So they're not going to talk to you until they know you and trust you. Now, the introvert, in some cases, they may see a person 4, 5, 6 times before they even think about even engaging them. And this is another thing that people, they will misinterpret. They'll think, oh, this person is really weird, but they're just trying to sense whether they can trust this person. So it may be a person, introvert may see you 4, 5, maybe 6 times before they go to talk to you because they just don't know how to engage you and they don't know what you're about. And they want to study things like your body language and your personality before they can engage you. So that's one of the things that a lot of people misinterpret about people in the scene. They'll sit there and think that, oh, this guy's an elitist or he's a jerk. But sometimes it's just that that guy doesn't know you, because when it comes down to an introvert, in a lot of cases, it takes time for them to build a relationship with someone, and it takes time for them to earn that let that person in before they can before they feel like they can trust them. And this is a key thing as it relates to introverts and how they interact with others that extroverts usually don't understand and people don't understand. Now, a person who has been hurt with social anxiety disorder, what will happen to them is they will make efforts to just completely avoid people altogether out of fear of being bullied or harassed or humiliated. So they're going to make a serious effort to put some distance between them. And if they have to go to a social situation, they are going to be on extreme edge. And this is something a lot of people in the scene, they need to understand about some people, is that they do struggle with that social anxiety, and it can really put you on edge. And this is why some people, they have to, in some cases, have to take medicine to deal with mental health because of the anxiety that they have. The social anxiety for some people is so bad that they have to take medicine to calm their nerves and to get better, whereas others, they can move their lives forward. And what happens with a lot of shy people is some shy people can get over the shyness if they're in a positive environment. And if they're in a positive environment, they can stop being shy and become social. Whereas an introvert, in a lot of cases, they're just not used to being social all the time. So if they are social with people they trust, like really close friends and really close family members, and they're comfortable with those people, and they'll go to events with those people, but they won't really interact too much with others because large group settings and large social settings, this is the kind of stuff that makes introverts really tired, and it really drains them. An introvert, if you put them in a big social situation like a nightclub, or a concert, they will have to they'll be there for a while, and then they have to go home very quickly because it just sucks a lot of energy out of you, and it just makes you really tired. For an introvert, it can make you really tired being in a crowd, and it can wear you down. George, glad to see you here at the stream, but introverts have jobs, but the whole thing is that they're in jobs where they aren't around a lot of people. If you have an introvert, they tend to perform well in jobs that are solitary. Like myself, I'm a writer right now, and I do these YouTube videos. But introverts tend to they tend to work well in jobs where they have to be by themselves, or they have to do things on their own, or they have a lot of autonomy. But if you put an introvert in a job, like say a receptionist job, they're going to fall completely apart. That's when they're going to have to deal with issues as related to being tired in crowds. And that's when they also have to deal with issues as related to social anxiety, because one negative interaction can literally make an introvert shut down. So it's about the kind of job an introvert wants and what they need. But usually introverts tend to perform better in jobs where they are by themselves, have some autonomy, and just can go out here and do things on their own. They're very good writers. They're very good artists. And if you just give introverts a lot of space, they tend to be very good. They tend to be great performers, and they tend to do a very great job. So when you have an introvert, they tend to work well alone, and they tend to work well when they are doing stuff on their own. However, if I put them in a heavy social job, they're just going to fall completely apart. If I put them on something like a receptionist position, they're just going to fall completely apart. And because that job does not fit their personality. No, George, anybody can be an introvert, and it doesn't have to be an oppressed class or disenfranchised class. There are wealthy introverts out there, but all introverts and shy people, they struggle with the fear of humiliation, the fear of embarrassment, and these are the things that make them not want to participate in social interactions. Now, one of the things I started to see with the Goth generation gap was that a lot of Goths aren't going to the clubs, and the previous generations did. Now, the first generation of Goths, they managed to overcome their issues of introversion by going out to different clubs. So a lot of Goths, they were shy, and because they were latchkey kids, they had to learn how to survive on their own. And one of the ways they learned how to survive on their own was by going out and socializing with like-minded people in the subculture. And this was the place where a lot of people felt safe. Now, when it comes down to introverts, the one thing that they want is an environment where they are safe. And this is why a lot of people liked going to the club, because it was a place where they could be with like-minded people and a place where they could feel safe with like-minded people. So a lot of Goths, they would go to the club of the first generation, but the second generation, a lot of them grew up at home, a lot of them grew up sheltered, and also a lot of people, they didn't have the money to go out, so they tended to stay at home. So you saw a lot of Goths staying at home, and they didn't want to go to the club because, one, a lot of them did not really like a lot of groups, and then some people, they had social anxiety, and then others just didn't have the money. They were more comfortable with smaller, more intimate settings, like, say, a Starbucks, which is smaller and more, well, there's people and there's not many people. Or if they had to go to an event, they could go with friends where they felt safe, like a Comic-Con or a concert. Now, Goku92, son, asks a great question. Why do people pick on introverts? Well, one of the reasons why a lot of bullies pick on introverts is because, one, they are alone, and because they are alone, that makes them a target for a lot of bullies. And two, they tend to pick on introverts because a lot of times introverts are very different people. So oftentimes people who are different and are not like the norm, your bullies like to pick on them because they are not like other people. And when it comes down to people in the Goth subculture or the darkly inclined, they often have a bullseye on them due to people seeing how different they are and how different they think. And because they see that difference inside of them and sense that difference, they want to either, one, try to make that person conform to the ideal standard, or two, if they cannot make them conform to the ideal, that's when they want to destroy that person. And I drew on, and when I was writing Spellbound, Matilda runs into a group of bullies led by the Chantel, and they want to destroy the Matilda because she is a biracial light-skinned woman, one, and because she's a quiet kid who is different from other kids. So I drew from a lot of my own personal experience growing up and being bullied in junior high school and high school to write Spellbound. And I wanted kids in the scene to understand that everybody who is different deals with this, and they have to find a way to overcome it by discovering their voice. And that's one of the things that every kid in the goth subculture has to learn how to do, and every adult has to learn, is how to find their voice. And that's a process that everybody has to learn how to do, but a lot of people, they're not encouraged to do it because they have a lot of negative experiences, and that's what makes them want to further withdraw, because that's one of the things that a lot of kids in the scene are struggling with right now, and even a lot of adults are struggling with, is finding a way to find their voice, finding a way to start speaking for themselves, and find a way to stand up for themselves. Because when it comes down to being an introvert, one of the things that really makes kids get discouraged is believing that somebody is going to hurt them, somebody is going to humiliate them. And it's that fear that keeps a lot of kids in the subculture from going out here and going for what they want and going out to live their dreams. And this is something that as I was watching so many goth videos over the last 3 to 4 years, this was something I wanted to really address in my literature, like the Spinsterella trilogy. And it was something that I believe needed to be talked about in the subculture overall, because when I watch a lot of videos, yeah, they'll talk about fashion, they'll talk about the music, but the thing I believe really needed to be talked about was the issue of introversion, shyness, and social anxiety. These 3 issues really need to be talked about, because a lot of kids, they express themselves darkly with their style and the music that they listen to, but the thing that that could help them the most is knowing that there are people out here who are dealing with the same struggles they're dealing with, and are still dealing with them. As a 45-year-old man, I'm still dealing with introversion and social anxiety from my experiences with bullies. And the whole thing is, I want those kids to know that there are people out there who are still dealing with this, still working through this, and still persevering in spite of this. Now, I myself have come a long way in the last, I'd say, about 16, 17 years myself as an introvert, as a person who's had social anxiety. And it's been a long journey, because I remember back when I lost a job back in 2002, where I went through this long period of depression, where I got to the point after I got fired from this receptionist job where I couldn't even talk, because the guy at the job said I was hostile on the phone with people. And that really hurt me so bad that I didn't even want to hear my own voice or even go near a phone. And that's how deep the trauma can go for a person who is dealing with introversion, is that you don't even want to speak because people, they criticize you, and that can make you shut down. I've seen people, it can just really impede a person's progress to have somebody come at you that negatively, and it really hurts a lot of people when they have to deal with these things, and you can lose so much time as a result. Because I lost a lot of years, as I lost a whole year of my life as a result of that. I mean, 2003 was like a dead zone for me after I lost that job, where I just completely shut down. And that's why I wanted to do this stream, because I know so many kids, they deal with that. And after one bad experience, it can literally make them completely shut down completely. And that's the thing that can really, cost you time. And time is an intangible that you can't get back. And time is something that, you should really appreciate and value. And that's one of the things I've come to appreciate and value over the last 12 12, 13 years just trying to get my life back together. I'm still not where I want to be, but I've managed to try to get things back together to some semblance of routine. But I was one of the things that I know so many goth kids deal with is being introverted and then just having one bad experience that can make them shut down. And I want them to know that, you know, if it happens, it's not the end of the world, but you have to continue to persevere. So you have to keep persevering in the face of the adversity and know that there are people out here who have your experience, have been through what you've been through, and people who want to help you be who you want to be. Because one of the big problems, a lot of people, when they try to help introverts, is they try to make them and shy people and socially anxious people is make them comfortable in their standard, not understanding our world runs completely different. So when it comes down to an introvert, you may say that, oh, I want you to go see this, but they are not going to be quick to react, because when it comes down to an introvert, they tend to think more and they need time to think and process things before they go out here and act. So a lot of people, what they want them to do is act almost immediately, but shy people, introverted people, and socially anxious people, they don't tend to act very quickly. They tend to take their time. They tend to process things slowly, and that's because they're thinking about how they want to respond and thinking about how they want to do things. Because introverts, they have, in some cases, they want to make sure they do things right. And this is something that they want to process so that they can get it right. So that's something that people need to understand, that a lot of people, they just don't understand because they want everybody to be like them, but everybody isn't the same. And introverts, shy people, and socially anxious people, they are completely different. Excuse me. So a shy person, they will be scared to go at first, but then they would probably think about it. An introvert will plan for a long while before they go. And a socially anxious person, they would have to try to work through their anxiety before they had a social interaction, and go out here to do stuff. So people have to understand that. And that was one of the things I wanted to address, and I did address it in several videos, because several older goths, they wondered why kids weren't going to the club. But they have to understand, with an introvert, they're not just going to run and jump into a club or a social situation, because one, social situations terrify them, and two, they need time to think about how they want to approach a social situation to avoid embarrassment. So it may be sometimes 3 months, 6 months, or 7 months, or even a year before an introvert decides to actually go out. And that may be a long struggle, but the whole thing is, it takes time for them to do that, and it takes time for them to work things out before they go out here to go do things. And this is something some of the older goths have to understand about a lot of the younger kids, and why they are avoiding the clubs and the things that were social places of the early subculture, from people from the 70s up to the 90s, the things that they did. Because a lot of the Gen Ys, the millennials, and Gen Zs, their whole socialization process is completely different than the early kids, because they had to learn how to do things on their own. It was all about survival. Whereas a lot of kids today, they are used to being at home with their parents. And I'm going to read through some of the chats. Rob IS, shy people they're not usually beta, but they, when it comes down to shy people, there are possibilities for them to be alpha, but because a lot of them are leaders, but the whole thing is their approach to leadership is very different, and they tend to do more observing and listening, because one of the great traits of introverts and shy people is that they tend to be very good listeners, and they're very analytical, So they tend to take their time to listen to people, and they tend to take a more objective approach to processing information. So they are more focused on things like problem solving than they are trying to have personal relationships with people. They're more about solving the problem than having relationships with people. And the relationships they have with people, if they do have them, they tend to be very close relationships because they know that they can trust that person. So they're very good leaders and they're good organizers. And that's one of the great traits about introverts. Those are alpha traits, but they're not beta. Betas are followers, and betas are submissive, but introverts, they tend to do their own thing. They tend to follow their own lead. And if they can lead themselves, they can usually lead others overall. George asks, what are some common causes of someone being introverted? Well, the common causes of people becoming introverts are some people they're born like that. Others become introverts because of traumatic experiences like bullying from peers or domineering parents, and that causes them to withdraw. And others, they become introverts because that's just who they are. So there's no difference. There's no one common cause. It can vary from person to person. Examples of successful introverts, I would say Bill Gates. I would say many of the people in the comic book industry. There are lots of them out there, lots of shy, introverted people, who are successful out here. And they are out here all the time. Thank you, Brother Cap. The reason why I make this because I know so many goth kids and many even goth adults are struggling with this, and I wanted them to know that this is a topic that I wanted to discuss. And I've seen so many kids out there, and I wish somebody would take the time to talk to kids in the scene about this because it's something people are struggling with. It's something people are dealing with. But I didn't see many videos dealing with it, but it had a direct connection to why a lot of kids weren't going to the clubs and why they weren't going out as much. But a lot of kids, they weren't going out because they really, well, some kids were introverts, some kids were shy, and other kids are dealing with social anxiety. And this is causing people to shut down. And I wanted them to know that they have to start making a process to build their confidence to go out. And this is something that I wanted to see more kids in the subculture and more adults in the subculture get an understanding of so that kids could start building their confidence, because building people's confidence is how they learn how to start going out. But this is a process that is going to be very slow, and people have to be very patient and understanding about that process, because when you're dealing with an introvert, you're not going to get instantaneous results. This process from person to person may take anywhere from, I say, 5 years to 10 years to do for a person to start feeling safe and comfortable enough to start wanting to do things like go out. But when it comes down to an introvert, they would rather, they prefer smaller, more intimate relationships than they do large gatherings of people. So one of the big mistakes a lot of people make is thinking that you can just, let's have the introvert go to the concert, but that's the worst thing you can do, or go to a club, because when it comes down to those environments, the one, they're filled with lots of people, and two, they have a lot of noise. Now, one of the things people don't understand about introverts is introverts, they really can't stand a lot of noise. And when you have a person with social anxiety, this can really make them nervous, and it can really put them on edge. If you put a person in a noisy place like a club or a concert, it could literally make them shut down, or if they have mental health issues, it can lead to an episode. So it's not something that you want to encourage early on. It's something people have to work up towards. And it's something people have to understand about people who have a lot of issues like social anxiety, because people who are socially anxious, they are very on edge just for being in a large crowd of people, and putting them in a noisy place, that really makes them even more anxious. And with the introvert, all that's going to do is make a person shut completely down, because large crowds of people, it makes introverts completely shut down. And that's can be very detrimental to an introvert. Rob IS asks, when a guy like Sandman tells the brutal truth in his videos, do you think it would help confidence? Um, I think it does, because when it comes down to a person who tells you the raw truth, what they're doing that out of love. And if you understand that a person is doing that out of love, it doesn't hurt, because I myself, again, have social anxiety and I'm an introvert myself. So Sandman's videos don't hurt me. They just let me know what's going on. And when you are straight with someone, like an introvert, they tend to respect you because you are being straight with them. And the introverts, shy people, they value honesty. And people who are socially anxious, they will come to trust you because you are being honest with them. So that way you earn people, and a person, especially a person with social anxiety's trust, is by telling them the truth. So when a guy like Sandman or myself comes out here with some brutal truth, this is something that really helps build confidence in people, because you're being straight with them. What really hurts an introvert are these people who want to be your friend and want to try to hide things to spare your feelings. That really hurts a lot of introverts, because these people are hiding things, and hiding those things can lead to a person be feeling betrayed, and you hiding things can really hurt them and their growth, because the thing that helps people grow is you telling them the straight truth, and the straight truth, that's the thing that's going to help you grow. But the whole thing is, so many kids, they think that, because a lot of people wonder, oh, why would they just get dressed up to make a video? That's another thing people don't understand about a lot of people in the goth subculture, is that the kid who's making the goth YouTube video, they feel safer in front of that camera in some cases than going outside, and they feel safer with those people on the internet than people in the streets. So people will say, oh, why are they making these YouTube videos? But the people online, a lot of times they're more supportive than people in the street. So that's one of the things people need to understand about why somebody would get dressed up to make a video, because they feel safe on the camera, but they don't feel safe with others. So this is something that a lot of kids, they're struggling with, and a lot of older people are struggling with, because I've seen people in their 20s or their 30s, and they feel a lot safer in front of the camera because they feel like they can trust the camera like a friend than they feel going to a person, because they've been burnt by a lot of people. And that's something that they've dealt with. Brother CapEx, how long did it take me to get comfortable in front of the camera? It took a good, I say, 3 to 4 years. I've been doing these videos for about 3 to 4 years now. And with myself being an introvert, the first couple of videos I made, I didn't look into the camera, because like many of the kids in the scene, because I would watch a lot of them and they wouldn't look into the camera. But that's because they wanted to make their videos, and the whole thing is that they had to have a starting point. This is one of the things other people don't understand about introverts, is that they have to have a starting point. And yeah, they're not going to look in the camera in the beginning, because they're still trying to work things out for themselves. They're still trying to work things out as relates to their personal process. And you're not going to see a person looking directly in the camera first off when they're starting to make videos. And a lot of people, they will want to go out here and attack that person. And again, that's all it's going to do is discourage that kid or that person in the scene. And that's something people shouldn't do, because everybody has to have a starting point. Everybody's videos, when they start out, they're going to be, people using phrases like, and like these other phrases, because they are trying to get comfortable with themselves. They're trying to get comfortable with the way they're speaking on camera, the way they're working their presence. So they're trying to work things out as related to themselves. And that's something that I started to see in a lot of goth YouTubers' videos. And I didn't want to critique anyone, because I felt that this is something they needed to work out for themselves. And this was part of their growth process overall. So you may see a couple of goth YouTubers, they're sitting there, they may not be acting as social as you want them to be, but this is all part of their process. And it took a lot of courage for them to just even get up and put on their makeup, put on their clothes, and get in front of a camera. And that right there just needs to be applauded, because they felt passionate enough about something to talk about it. And that's why when I was watching all those thousands of hours of videos, I would just sit there and just listen to what they had to say, because I felt it was important to listen to what they had to say. Because if they came out here and made that video, then this had to be something that they were passionate about. So I felt it was important to just sit there and listen to them. And George asks again, how common is it to go from an introvert to a confident person? Well, that's something that is very common if a person is in a very supportive environment. And that was one of the things that I went through with the 3 books in the Smith-Dorella trilogy, was showing one example of how a goth goes from an introvert like Matilda was in Spellbound to a person who is trying to overcome introversion in her career and her start of her budding career in Legendary Mad Matilda, to Smith-Dorella, where she is an executive and still struggling with shyness and social anxiety as she's trying to get with the man she wants to get involved with. So I show how a person in the scene can overcome the issues of introversion and social anxiety in the 3 books of the Smith-Dorella trilogy. And I wanted people to understand that, yes, it is possible for you to do this, but I also wanted people to understand that it is a process, and it's a process that everybody starts at their own time and at their own pace. And one of the big problems that people do is they try to force people like goths to go down their process, and they want to try to shoehorn things like, oh, just go out and do something. But people go out when they feel confident enough to go out, and they go out and try to do things on their own pace. And this is something people need to understand about introverts, is that they may not come out the first time to go out and be social, but they may come around the second time, and they may be even around the 6th or 7th time before they feel confident to even introduce themselves or want to go out here and talk to someone. So talking to people is like the last thing that people do, but they have to go through this process if they want to start moving forward. And the whole thing that encourages people to move forward is especially the support of others and the love of others. This is something that can really make a major difference in a introverted goth's life, is having people who are encouraging in their lives. And that's something that people in the scene, a lot of them, they need, is to have people who will encourage them to go out here and take those next 2 or 3 steps forward. And when I was writing the Spellbound, I wanted to have the Matilda Crowley character be around those type of people so that she could learn how to find her voice and start speaking for herself and started expressing herself in a way that made her feel more comfortable with herself. Because one of the things that introverts deal with is feel like you have to fit in these boxes. And that's one of the things that was a major theme in Spellbound, that it is frustrating for a lot of introverts. You're told you have to fit into these boxes, but the whole thing is you don't have to fit in these boxes. You can be the person you want to be. You just have to have the courage to go out here and be that person you want to be. Sayeda says they're an introvert. The people in my neighborhood are chaotic. Yeah, that's what I deal with, and that's what a lot of people in the scene deal with, is that you are different. You are different on the inside, and because you're different from on the inside, this is one of the reasons why people, they have a hard time dealing with you, because they don't understand you. And you, a lot of times you're dealing with that, and people are just telling you, oh, you can just try to be like everybody else, but on the inside you're not like everybody else. And that's what a lot of goths, they struggle with, is knowing on the inside that they're different, and people aren't going to accept them, because they want to fit them into this box. And one of the things that people try to do to fit people in boxes is create stereotypes. And that's one of the other things that a lot of goths deal with, is people trying to create stereotypes about them, because they don't understand where they're coming from, and they don't understand the dark perspective they're coming from. And because they don't understand where they're coming from, what they will do is try to demonize you. Like I've seen with a lot of people, when I ever would talk about goths in my family, what they would do is say, oh, these goths worship the devil, goths are evil. And myself sitting there watching the videos, talking to people online, I've gotten to know a lot of goths, and they're genuinely nice people. They're very friendly people. They just have a different and darker view of things. And in most cases, many goths are more scared of you than you are of them, because that's the way it is with an introvert and a shy person, especially a socially anxious person. They're more scared of you than you are of them, and they're more scared of having a social interaction with you than you are with them, because they fear being embarrassed in that social interaction, and they fear being humiliated in that social interaction. So that's why they try to make efforts to avoid it, because if a introvert has a lot of negative interactions with people, that's what makes them withdraw, and that's what makes them want to do things like stay home or make YouTube videos and interact with people online, rather than go outside to interact with regular people on a regular basis. Rob IX asks, what percentage of goths are white, black, Asian, and Hispanic? I really don't know. There has never been any sort of statistics on that. All I know is I just watched a lot of videos and looked at a lot of information, and there have been goths of all ethnicities and races and religions ever since the inception. And I have not heard about the 10,000 hour rule by Malcolm Gladwell, Rob. George, I'm going to try. The empowerment does work from an individual or group level. So, but a person with a supportive environment, what they can do is they start to feel more confident, because they have people supporting them. But some people, they tend to work better on their own. It just varies from person to person as it relates to shy people and introverted people. Shy people tend to grow a little faster, because once they face their fear, they can move forward. But with an introvert, that's just part of who they are. And some people who are introverts, it's wired into their brain chemistry, because their brain chemistry is different. So there are some introverts who basically they're just not wired for being around people, and what happens is their minds will shut down, their bodies will shut down in crowds, and this is something that they do. Thank you, Silent Trailer, for picking up The Man Crisis. The Man Crisis is a nonfiction book I did talking about the struggles that men are going through today. That one's on Amazon.com, along with the 3 books of the Spinsterella trilogy. Sayeda asks, what makes it work? Says what makes it work for her as the black sheep of the family, is the first one to graduate from high school and college. And yeah, that happens because you are different, and you've actually had the confidence to go out here and persevere in the face of adversity. And I've had family members deal with that because those other family members, in some cases, they get jealous of you for going out here and achieving something. And one of the things they do is try to shut you out because they know that you're out here persevering and working hard. Hi, Black Sand. Glad to see you here in the struggle. I mean, not the struggle, in the stream. And this one, I'm talking about dealing with shyness and introversion and social anxiety in the Goth subculture. And this was one that I was very passionate about making because I saw so many Goth YouTubers, and this is something so many are struggling with, and nobody is really making too many videos about it. So I decided to go out here and make it because I believe it's a subject that definitely needed to be talked about in the scene. And it's one that a lot of people, they want to talk about it, but they're afraid to talk about it because so many people, it's a very personal thing being an introvert and being shy or having to deal with social anxiety. And the thing that people need to understand is that you can't generalize about it because these are three different, completely different issues. Again, a shy person is a person who just has a genuine fear of social situations. This is just something that they have. Whereas a socially anxious person, this is a person who is, this is the most extreme because socially anxious people, they're just terrified of social situations and they are terrified of being in social situations to the point where some get avoidant personality disorder where they just try to avoid social interactions, and some wind up getting social phobia where they want to completely avoid people in social situations. So that's the extreme of it, is social anxiety disorder. But introverts, they have a they just, that's just naturally who they are. And a lot of people, they want to generalize, but you have to understand you're dealing with three different, completely different issues, and all three issues have to be, they have different solutions. Whereas for a shy person, maybe all they need is a little encouragement to be more social and a little more of a positive environment that will make them more social. An introvert usually just likes being by themselves, or they like to have very intimate relationships with people they feel close to and they can trust. And this is something that a lot of introverts do. And a lot of people will, again, think that this person is being conceited and elitist in the Goth scene. However, this is just how introverts operate, in that they want to be around people they believe they can trust, and they usually form very close relationships with people they can trust. So a lot of people, they will misunderstand that introvert, think that they are aloof and conceited and stuck up, or in the case of the Goth subculture, they'll think this person is some sort of elitist snob, but it's just that they don't have a connection with you and they don't know you well enough to trust you to form that personal relationship with you just yet. So they don't know you well enough to have that relationship with you, and they need to get to know you. But once they get to know you, you're going to have a friend for life, a person who will be literally like a family member. And that's what you're going to have when you gain an introvert's trust, because introverts, once they feel safe with you, then they will open up to you. And this is something people need to understand about introverts, especially Goth introverts, is that they have to earn, you have to earn their trust, and then they will open up to you. Now, people on the street, they will, or extroverts, they're used to being open, but introverts, it's a bit of a process, and you have to be able to have that process to get closer to them. But a lot of people want to force it, but usually introverts, they usually choose people based on what they sense is that person being trustworthy and that person being safe. Black Avenger asks, how many Black people are in the Goth culture? I really don't know how many Black people are in the Goth culture, but I have a lot of Goth supporters on YouTube. I have a lot of Goth viewers on YouTube. They watch my videos on the regular, and they have been the ones going out here and promoting the books of the Spinsterella trilogy, because this was one of the books that I did because it was part of something I love. I love the goth subculture, and I wanted to do a book featuring a black goth, and that was one of the things I wanted to do, because when it came down to so-called diversity, when it comes down to it, all we get or is a certain narrative as related to black people. We get the stories about the thugs, the strong, independent black woman, the hood rats, the baby mamas. We get those stories about the black experience, but we don't get the stories about the black experience about black women or black men who are darkly inclined or part of the goth subculture, even though black people have been part of goth subculture again since the inception of the goth subculture. And goth YouTubers like Angela Benedict and I Am George, they would talk about this on the regular. And most people, they don't watch those videos in the black community because most black people, they don't know about the black goth subculture at all, because mainstream media buries the black goth subculture, because the black goth subculture does not fit the narrative of mainstream media, which only wants you to see thugs, strong, independent black women, baby mamas, and dusty Negroes. Those are the only black people they want you to see. But here at SJS Direct, I wanted people to see the black goth subculture, and I wanted people to understand the overall goth subculture and the struggles that black goths deal with. And that's one of the reasons why I wrote the novel Spellbound, because after I wrote Spinsterella, which was the last book in the trilogy about Matilda Crowley's life, I felt that the story was incomplete after I watched all of those videos with all those goth YouTubers, and I got an understanding of the scene, and I got an understanding of the struggles of people in the scene. And I wanted to do a book that really talked about what people were doing in the scene and the struggles they dealt with, because people who are in the scene, a lot of them are shy, a lot of them are introverted, and people would think, oh, they are mean and crazy or all this stuff, when in actuality you're just dealing with someone who was just staying to themselves, because a lot of times they have been bullied and harassed, and what you see on the dark outside is a reflection of who they are on the inside. And this is just who they are, and this is something that people need to understand. And I wanted people to start seeing goths as people and not as the stereotypes that the mainstream media has been perpetuating about people in the scene. So I wanted you to see the people, and that was one of the reasons why I wrote Spellbound, and the other reason why I wrote Legendary Mad Matilda, so that you could see the Matilda Crowley's life as a part of the goth subculture and get to understand the struggle she went through. Now, I'm going to try to get through it. Yeah, Rob. In the '90s, goths were more visible out in public, and they were visible in the '80s. Um, I've seen goths as early as 2016. I remember I saw two black goths at the library I used to go to look for work. So goths are out there, but they tend these days, they come out every day, but it just have to be in the right place to see them. I saw two black goths at my local library back in 2016. So I have seen goths out and about here in New York on the regular, and they do go out. But a lot of the '90s was a big period for the goth subculture, and it was the period where it was extremely popular and more common. But there are people who have been in the scene and still are in the scene for years. Thomas asks, would this pertain to family and relationships, where a person has ambitions but there's no motivation? Yeah, that can really stifle an introvert's desire to persevere if they're around a lot of negativity, because if you're around a lot of negative people, that can cause an introvert to shut down, and it can also cause them to become socially anxious, because if you're in an environment with hostile family members, and hostile people in school, this is what can cause a person to completely shut down, because introverts, um, that type of environment is very toxic, and it can really suck all the energy out of a person and destroy all of their motivation to keep pushing. And that's something, again, I explore in Spellbound, where Matilda, at least she has her family and she has a neighbor, and those people encourage her when she has to deal with the toxicity of the school environment she's in. George says, when trying to work on empowerment, can you empower yourself and others as you go? Yeah, you can, because the positive energy you radiate as you persevere, that's going to influence others. Because that's one of the things that I wanted to do with this live stream, is empower goths to go out here and be the person they want to be and overcome things like social anxiety, things like introversion and shyness, and go out here and do the things that they want to do. Rob IS asks, so do modern goths embody the goth lifestyle 24/7, or do they do? It depends on the person. Some people, they just wear black clothing. Others, they put on the goth makeup, and others, they put it on for occasions, and it varies from person to person. So some people, they dress goth just to make YouTube videos, but because they have to work at a job, they will tone things down so they can go to work. Others, they are in strict families, so they will go out here and they will be what we call closet goths, and they will just put on their clothes when they want to go to places they want to go. And then there are other people who, again, they have outfits that they wear for every day, and then they have outfits that they wear whenever they're going someplace special, like a Comic-Con or a concert. But most people, they don't dress up in a full goth attire of things like spiked collars and a full outfit all the time. Usually, most people, they have different outfits for different occasions, and some people will tone things down depending on where they have to go. So it varies from person to person, and it varies from individual to individual. So, but people, they do different things, and they live their lifestyle very differently. Some people, they are in the closet. They listen to the music, and they look at the fashion, and some people will wear the fashion, like a lot of kids who are like really introverted, they'll wear the fashion when they're making a video, but they wouldn't wear it in the street because that's something that they're afraid of being embarrassed. So there's a lot of closet goths out there, and I want to do the stream. I definitely want to do a stream on that one. And that's something I would love to do, is a stream on that, because I know that there's a lot of closet goths out there, and they want to take that next step, but they're afraid to make that next step and just express themselves as goth. But they're out there. There are a lot of closet goths out there. I run into that myself, Sayeda. I run into that a lot from Christians. I remember when I did a book called All About Maryland, I ran into a lot of hostility from my Christian family members just because I put a nude on the cover of the book. So they got mad at me. And a lot of people, again, remember, Christianity is this. Christianity is not what you profess, it is what you practice. So the actions will tell you about people more than their words, and their actions will define their character. So when people show you the truth about themselves, believe them, and then try to find more positive people to be around. Arcope's girl Sakus is right. Goth is starting to evolve, and it's starting to become a bit more back to the mainstream. I'm seeing it start to grow again. We had a lot of people, they were saying that goth is dead, but it's not. It's the people in the scene who have kept it alive, and I see it starting to grow again, and I see it starting to make those steps towards mainstream, because when I see a lot of companies starting to grow, like your Kill Stars and stuff. I'm starting to see it start making those steps again towards becoming mainstream, because one of the things that helps you start to grow is that economic base, and that economic base is something that's very powerful towards helping a subculture grow. Because with your subculture as an economic base, it's going to really start making, it's really going to start being something people start taking seriously. Black Sam makes a very good point. Modern socializing is something you have to learn by doing, and that's one of the things that introverts have to learn, is that you have to go out and do. And one of the things that scares a lot of introverts is going out and doing. They're afraid of failing and they're afraid of looking bad, but this is something you just have to learn how to overcome. It was something I had to learn how to overcome myself, being an introvert and socially anxious, is that, for each mistake you make, you're going to learn what not to do, and you're going to learn what not to do the second time, and you're going to learn how to persevere in the face of adversity. And that was one of the things I've learned over the last 12, 13 years, just publishing books, is what not to do. And I've learned to just keep on going. And I had to learn how to keep persevering in the face of failure. And I learned that failure wasn't a bad thing. Now, one of the things a lot of introverts have a hard time dealing with is failure. They think that their whole world is going to end, especially a lot of young kids. They believe that their whole world is going to fall completely apart, but that world can only fall apart if you let that world fall apart. And mistakes that you make are going to make you a lot stronger, and because you're going to build the discipline and the character to overcome. Now, when I first started publishing books, back in the late 2000s, I used to do hand-drawn covers like these, and people would attack me, talking about your little books have lousy covers, but I still persevered. And this book right here, Temptation of John Haynes, was a book that got 500 rejections from publishers and literary agents. But when I published it myself, it became one of the most critically acclaimed books. Now, this is a book that's darkly inclined Black fiction that I did. And I did this one, again, to show that you could put dark themes and African-American characters together. Most publishers wouldn't want to touch it, but I did manage to get it out there. And this book was made in 2011. And these days, I publish books like the Spinsterella trilogy, which feature professional art on the covers, like Spinsterella and Legendary Mad Matilda. And I could only get there from persevering in the face of failures and the face of personal attacks. And that's something an introvert has to learn, a shy person has to learn, is that, yes, you're going to fail, but failure isn't the end of the world, and you have to keep persevering. Rob IS asks, is Man Crisis my only nonfiction book? No, I have 4 or 5 others. I have Stop Simping, Why Men Don't Need Finance to Get Romance, Manginas, They Look Like Men, but They Act Like Ladies, The Misadventures of Captain Savaho, and Why 70% of Black Women Are Single. And the book Stop Simping, I think that's a very good book for a lot of young goths out there, because that book is going to teach you how to have social interactions with women and how to build confidence, because a lot of young guys who are in the scene, they don't really understand how to go out there and be social. And that book would really help a lot of people in the scene, because I've heard about a lot of guys who are in the scene, they get taken advantage of by predatory females. So that's a one that I wrote to really help a lot of young guys out there, and a lot of kids in the scene. They could use that book to really help them work and have relationships. Yeah, that's true, R-Corps. Goth was nothing like the Killstar. That I always look at Killstar like it's like Ralph Lauren and Tommy Hilfiger. It's like really promoting a lot of stereotypes. So I really wish that more people would learn not to just buy just Killstar, but to go out here and go out here and create their own style. Because one of the things that I did when I was writing the trilogy, after I learned from a lot of people in the scene, is that the clothes that you buy is based on who you are and what you want to express about yourself. Because when I was working on the Matilda Crowley character, the whole concept of her becoming the Black Widow was based on her being shy, and it was based on her being an introvert and her feeling misunderstood, because that's why she identified with the Black Widow spider, because most people think that the Black Widow spider is a predator that's out to hurt people, but in actuality, the Black Widow spider is an introvert that wanted to be left alone. And that was also part of her character as a biracial woman. She felt that she was being misunderstood because most people were projecting stereotypes onto her, and she wanted to use the look of the Black Widow and the aesthetic of the Black Widow that she was designing to show how much she loved being Black, because the whole concept of the Black Widow was based on her expressing her love for Black culture from the golden age of Black culture, which was the 1930s all the way up to the 1960s. And that was all related to her aesthetic style and her look. She wanted to express her love for the elegance and grace and beauty of Black women. And that was all part of her look. And that's one of the things every goth has to do, is start, instead of thinking about going out here and trying to buy commercial outfits to get a generic look, is find out what makes what is about you want to express to the world in your look. And that's something I want to see more goths do, rather than just go out here and buy, stuff like Killstar or these other designer brands. I want them to feel comfortable about expressing themselves. But we're not. But the whole thing is that we have people like Killstar. They want to put these pentagram and Wicca designs, and that's not something you really want to put on if you don't understand what those symbols mean. And that's something that can lead to a lot of introverts becoming embarrassed and humiliated, because you're wearing symbols you don't even know what they look, what they're about, or what they are. Um, um, Glad to see you here, Benny. I've been building the base, and one of the big bases for my viewership is the goth subculture, and a lot of the goth brothers and sisters out there, and goths in the scene. And that's one of the reasons why I do the live streams, is because I really want to deal with these issues again, because a lot of people aren't talking about introversion. They're not talking about shyness. They're not talking about social anxiety. And it's something that needs to be talked about. And I really wanted to discuss it in depth. I see you, Luciano. Glad to see you, that you're here. But I really wanted to deal with this in depth, because as a person who has struggled with social anxiety, a person who has struggled with shyness, and a person who is an introvert, I wanted kids to know that, yes, there are people out here who are older who are dealing with this and still struggling with it. I might do this till midnight, but I might do this till midnight if you guys want me to, but I'm here to be here for you. So I might, if I want to be here I might be here till midnight. So, but I'm doing this because so many kids, they are out here and they think that they're alone, but they're not alone. There are other people out here who have dealt with this and are struggling with this, and I want them to know that they're okay. There's nothing wrong with them, and they can start working on the process of moving forward at their pace, not at other people's pace. Because that's another problem introverts in the scene deal with, is people wanting to, again, push them to go on their schedule, not their own. And that was one of the things I did in the Spinsterella trilogy, was show how the Matilda Crowley character, she was dealing with this ever since she was 16 years old. And that journey of finding her voice started with Spellbound, but by the end of Spinsterella, she was like 40 years old when she finally found a relationship with the man that she wanted to have. and that was she was still dealing with struggles as related to being an introvert. And in that story, Spencerella was dealing with the whole aspects of introverts and having romance. And again, it's completely different than a romance that was traditional. When it comes down to introverts, they do things, again, very differently. And I wanted to really make a commentary on that in Spencerella about people who are introverts. They don't rush through things. Things don't just happen overnight, and things take time, and they tend to progress on their own terms. Luciano, are you talking to me about the about racism contributing to social anxiety? That was part of it for me, because on some of these jobs you run into these white guys who they don't like you, and then they want to try to sabotage you. So, yeah, I run into that myself, and that can contribute to your social anxiety because you feel like these people are going to try to embarrass you again, and you feel like you're going to wind up in this situation again. So I've run into that. And I remember the first couple of days when I was working at the library at City College, I had such bad anxiety that I was even starting to stutter, and I was starting to have issues eating. And these were issues that I was struggling with when I first started there. But I had to persevere because I saw things that I wanted to do. And I managed to try to face that fear, even though I was stuttering, having a hard time eating. And I managed to persevere in the face of it because I had the goal of getting the three books that were in boxes and manuscripts published. And those three books were the Cassandra Cookbook, now known as A Recipe for Success, All About Marilyn and the Temptation of John Haynes. And I set a goal for getting those books published. And that was something that helped me to overcome my social anxiety. And it's one of those things that I believe could help a lot of kids in the scene overcome their social anxiety, is setting a goal for themselves that they want to do and working towards that goal, because that was one of the things that helped me fight through my social anxiety and really start moving myself forward. I'm sorry you had to do with that, Black Sand, with dealing with the drug dealers. Yeah, they will try to get you hooked because they think that there's something wrong with you. And they will try to get you hooked on stuff, and that's what they'll try to do. But there's nothing wrong with you. Just that the whole thing is that people who are introverts, they have to deal with things on their own terms. But this is what extroverts and people don't understand. They want to try to get people on drugs and alcohol to help them come out of themselves. But all that does is lead to a vicious cycle of addiction. So some people, this is what they would do, is they would go out here and they would start drinking because it lowers their inhibitions, or they start taking drugs because it lowers their inhibitions. And what happens is it may lower your inhibitions and may make you act out more socially, but the whole thing is that it leads to a vicious cycle of addiction. But there is another way to overcome the issues of social anxiety and shyness and introversion, but it's a different process. But a lot of people, they don't want to go through the pain of the process. But the only way to grow is to go through that pain, and that's the only way you can move your life forward, is to face those fears. And in many cases, when you face those fears, you realize that they weren't as bad as you thought they were. Wow, I didn't know that about fentanyl, but I've heard some bad things, Black Sand, about fentanyl, that it just makes people crazy. And yeah, they will try to, a lot of drug dealers, they will try to hook you on stuff. And I saw that a lot in the 80s, and it destroyed a lot of people's lives in the 80s. Yeah, I've seen that too with the weed. The weed actually is like a gateway. It'll get people high, but then it doesn't work after a while. And what happens is they wind up taking more weed to deal with. They start taking harder drugs because the weed doesn't work. And I've seen that in my neighborhood here in the Bronx too. So I know how drugs can destroy people. And that's one thing introverts need to understand is they need to avoid drugs and alcohol because it doesn't help your situation. It only makes it worse. And you won't really be able to build your confidence because you're going to need this crutch to carry you from place to place. And that's something kids need to avoid desperately because when you have people taking drugs to lower their inhibitions, they're thinking that this is going to build their confidence. But what it's doing is it's making you dependent. And if it makes you dependent, then it's the drugs making you go out and do things and not you going out and being yourself. And that's one of the things I want people to do is go out here and be the best them they can be. And the only way, again, to do that is through work through your facing your fears on your own. Because when it comes down to an introvert, oftentimes we imagine things worse than they actually are. And because we imagine things worse than they actually are, we wind up procrastinating and never going out to actualize our potential when we could have had things we could have actually had. And that was one of the things that I go in depth on in Spinsterella is talking about how Matilda's fears of the quiet man almost keep her from having a relationship with him because she's projected all these ideas about him in her head. She has all these crazy ideas that he's going to be this killer. He's going to be this guy who beats up people. He's going to be dangerous. But once she gets to know him as a person, she starts to see him for who he is. And then she starts to see his potential in a relationship. So that was a key point that I put in the story for people to see about introverts and how we create a lot of times our own drama and our own problems. And those dramas and problems we create are those problems we create keep us from moving forward in our lives. So that's one of the things I put in Spinsterella was Matilda dealing with this fear of talking to this man, this stranger. And as she got to know him, she started to see a person that was just like herself, dealing with being an introvert, dealing with fear, and dealing with the same issues. And they both, as they come together and get closer, start working towards having that relationship that helps them both actualize their potential by the end of the story. So when it comes down to a lot of introverts, a lot of times it's our fears that keep us from moving forward. And a lot of times the fears that we have, that we find out once we face them, they really weren't, that there wasn't really anything to be scared about in the first place. Um, so that's something else I wanted to encourage a lot of goths to do with the whole Spinsterella trilogy was start working towards facing their fears because it's something that can keep you from having the life you want to have and being the person you want to be. So that's one of the things that being an introvert can do. It just slow. It's like, yeah, your process is slow, but it's what you want to do. And the whole thing is if you start taking those steps towards moving forward, then you can finally start to actualize the potential you have and be the person you want to be. So I myself, again, have struggled with being an introvert ever since I was a kid. And I know what a lot of kids are going through. And that's why, again, I do the live streams because I want the kids to know that they're not alone. Because a lot of kids, YouTube is their refuge. It's their place where they can feel safe. And a lot of kids out there, this is the place where they feel safe about being themselves and being the person they want to be. And I want them to know that you can take those steps towards being that person in real life too. But the whole thing is nobody wants to talk about being an introvert in the scene. A lot of times a lot of those videos, a lot of people think that, oh, that's not going to get views, but it's something everybody deals with, and it's a thing that is really keeping people from going out to places like clubs and meeting other people and going out here and having relationships with people who they could get closer to. So that's something that people they struggle with all the time, and a lot of people they struggle with, and I struggle with it still. I still struggle with it right now, and that's why. And I'm starting to like really make a lot. I was starting to make progress with these YouTube videos, and that was one of the things that really helped me a lot. A lot because again, back in 2003, I would never even think about even talking to anyone. I couldn't even use a phone at one time. And these days I'm making videos almost every day. And that's how far a person who's an introvert can go. And that's how far you can go once you start making those steps towards, again, moving forward, is you can start making those steps. And you can start, again, doing that. And that's something I did. It was a very slow process from 2003 all the way up to 2019. I mean, I wrote a lot of books, and I started doing YouTube videos. I started in 2010, but then my shyness got the better of me, and my anxiety got the better of me, and I had to stop for a while. But then I started again in 2013 doing videos, and I've been doing videos about 6 years now. And everything from my delivery to my arguments to my presentation has changed over the years. And again, that's all changed because I, over time, started to develop self-confidence, and I started to build my confidence. And with each video, I started getting more and more confidence. And that's something that, again, it's something every goth has to do if they want to actually realize their potential. You can go from being the introvert who stays to themselves to the person you want to be, but you have to start taking those steps when you feel ready to. And this is another thing that people they don't really get, is that it's up to the person to start taking those steps. And a lot of people, they were talking about how a lot of the goth clubs, the younger kids weren't going, but the younger kids, they need time to get to that place where they feel they are ready. So they have to get to that place where they feel ready to go out. And that place may take 6 months for one person, it may take a year for one person, it may take 2 years for a person. But if they get to that place, they have to be at that place when they're ready. And once they get to that place where they're ready, that's when they can start taking strides. Now, one of the issues that I have with some of the older goths and some of the people out there is a lot of them, they want to go after the younger kids and talk about how they need to go out and be a part of their scene. But the whole thing is, goth is goth as I see it. And the whole thing is they have to come in with what they have, and you have to look at what they have and not judge it by what you experience, because their world is completely different. That's where the goth generation gap starts to be a problem, because a lot of people, they want to criticize the younger kids when they come into the clubs or the places. And that, again, it can destroy an introverted kid or a shy kid, and it can literally destroy the life of a person who is socially anxious and send their life into a complete tailspin, because that type of humiliation, it can, especially for a socially anxious person, drive them into depression. And when I was looking at that older goth who attacked Black Friday, I was just horrified by that, because I knew about the issues she was having, and that kind of thing can really upset a person, can destroy a person's confidence and make them completely shut down. So I had a real issue with that, because there was no need to go into that type of attack on her. And yes, if you have an issue over all this commercialism, again, you have to start creating new content, and you have to start showing people how they can express themselves with just using basic clothes. Because this shirt I'm wearing, this is my part of my goth style, and it's just a black Glen plaid shirt, but this is how I do my style. And you have to find your style. So this is something that people in the scene need to understand, is that people need to find their style, and they have to feel safe about expressing their style. So that's something that also needs to be talked about, because again, it ties into being an introvert, because a lot of the people who want to criticize the younger kids for having their style, but that's their style. That's who they are. And they shouldn't be attacked for being who they are. That's a good thing to do, Black Sandus, to help you learn how to communicate. Like asking questions, and that's a great way. And then you can gauge their responses as they answer, and that's how you can learn how to study things like body language and social cues, and that can really help you do some things. I would love to, Brother Cap, I would love to do something with David Carroll. I did do something with David Carroll before. We did something about the black woman as God. We did that one a while back where we refuted that whole argument, and that video is still up here. But I would love to do some other collaborations. What I really wanted to do was a Goth Google Hangout. And if other Goths would want to work with me on that, I'll be glad to do that for them, with them, because I believe that we need to talk more about heavier substantive issues in the scene. And I also would love to see people talk more about the Black Goth subculture. Now, one of the Facebook groups I'm in, the Gothic community, they have been really pushing, showing images of Black people in the Goth scene. And I have been happy to see that, because a lot of times people, again, they think that Goth is a white thing. And again, Goth has never been white. I've seen so many Black Goth YouTubers online, and I've talked to so many Black Goth YouTubers. It's not funny. I've been on their channels. I've been watching their videos, and I know the history of the Goth subculture. And I know that Black people have been a part of the scene, again, since the inception of the scene. And that's something that more people need to know, because mainstream media, what they want to do is push this narrative that Goth is white, and they want to use that as a platform to create stereotypes about the Goth subculture, like they did during the era of the Columbine shootings, where they tried to make Goths out to be the bad guy, and they tried to demonize Goths by breathing brand new life into stereotypes about Goths. But we really need more people to show the true picture of Goth that I knew ever since the 90s. And that picture needs to be shown to more people so that they won't buy into mainstream media stereotypes. Because what mainstream media, and now, sir, I'm a darkly inclined Black man. I'm not an actual Goth, but I am a darkly inclined man. But I'm just saying that this was a Goth outfit for me and my style. But I enjoy the culture and the lore. I don't do conventions because I don't have any money, and I don't do cosplays because they don't make cosplays in my size. But the whole thing is, I wanted to do these Goth live streams so that other kids in the scene can, especially Black kids, can see that it's okay for them to be a part of the scene, and that there's a place for them to be in the scene. And that's something that isn't that a lot of kids feel scared to do, because as introverts, they have to deal with a lot of hostility, especially in the Black community, where everybody is all about conformity. Everybody is about fitting in. Everybody is about fitting into the black box that's acceptable to white people. And they're told that there's only one way to be Black, quote unquote Black. And you have to fit into these boxes, like the thug, the strong, independent Black woman, the baby mama, the hood rat, or the Uncle Tom. And they're told that these are the only personalities you can have. And that's not what being black is. And I go into depth with that in Spellbound when I talk about the darker shade of black. And the darker shade of black is the one where we define our own blackness, we design our own black identity, and we define who we are. And black goths, they are doing the thing that I know as related to the darker shade of black in defining their own blackness, defining their own black identity, and establishing their own standard of black. So black goths are actually ahead of the curve and refuting many of the stereotypes that your mainstream media wants to present out here about black people by defining their own blackness. And I want to see more black people going out here to define their own blackness. So that was one of the things I wanted to do with the 3 books of the Spinsterella trilogy, was show you that there are black people out here who are part of the goth scene, and they are defining their own blackness on their own terms, not trying to fit into the boxes that your white supremacists, your far leftists, or your conservatives want to put black people in. Okay, got 20 more minutes on this stream. If you guys have any questions, you can give me any questions you want to give me, and I'll be glad to answer them. But again, when you're dealing with shyness and introversion, it's something a lot of people don't understand, and it's a lot of things that, as related to people, a lot of people are used to socializing with people from their perspective, and they don't really see it from the other person's perspective, And when it comes down to introverts, they'll see it from where they're coming from, but not where other people are coming from. Luciano was asking, why are some goths so much into Christian rock? Well, when it comes down to goths, they have a darker view of things, and Christian rock also, in some cases, it does have a lot of dark themes in it. So that's another part of the music that they are into, because a lot of the themes relate to the darkness, and also at least relates to the light, because as it relates to the death of Christ, it leads to us coming into the light. That's one of the things that's important to a lot of people who follow Christ and follow God, is they see in that darkness is the light, and that light is the gift of salvation that Christ wants to give them. So that's why they're probably into Christian rock, because they are Christians themselves. Black Sand, the graphic novel Indiegogo that I'm doing, it right now, let me take a look at it right now. It has 36 days left, and we have $378 on the 25,000 goal, and it's 1% funded. I'm going to do what I can to get it funded, but we're at 1%, and I'm hoping to get the 99 in the 36 days. So I'm going to leave a link to the ISIS graphic novel Indiegogo in the chat, and you can donate to that if you want. And that Indiegogo is to fund the first ISIS graphic novel, the first comic book featuring the goddess next door, which will be based on 2019's ISIS series book, ISIS All That Glitters. And this book is available in paperback on Amazon.com. And if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can read ISIS All That Glitters for free. And you can also read the other 2019 book, Esteemed Goddess of, in paperback right now, or you can pick it up on Kindle Unlimited on April 23rd. So both books are on Kindle Unlimited, and you can read both books for free with Kindle Unlimited, or you can pick up these awesome paperbacks and pick up the 2 books of the 2019 catalog so far. There is a third book going to be a part of the 2019 catalog, and that's called John Haynes, Dark Succubus, and that one is darkly themed and darkly inclined. The John Haynes series is darkly inclined, and it's based on my whole darkly inclined view of the world. That one has a lot of goth themes. The first book, A Conversation with Death, has a scene inside of a goth coffee house, and there are a lot of goths in there. I always try to incorporate goths into my stories because I wanted people to see that the subculture and the people of the subculture, and I want them to see this, what the scene really is like. So that's one of the things I do with a lot of my literature is I incorporate a lot of goth characters and goth themes in my work, and that's something I do on the regular with all of my literature, whether it be books with goth heroines like the Spinsterella trilogy, or darkly inclined fiction like The Temptation of John Haynes, or ISIS series books like Bride of Dracula and Night of the Vampires and Escape from Transylvania. I don't know how goths vote, George. So goth is an international subculture, and I don't know anything about political affiliation, but most goths I know, they are very friendly, they are very tolerant, and a lot of them, they really don't like racists and white supremacists. And if they see a racist or a white supremacist, they call that person out. They kick those people out of their groups, and on Facebook and on YouTube, they don't like that in their scene because that racism is something, yes, they know it's there, but they really try to make efforts to fight it. And they also try to make efforts to fight against racists because they know that racists and white supremacists are not going to act in the best interest of the subculture, because when it comes down to racists and white supremacists, they want a smooth world where they can create stereotypes about people so that they can be seen as the ideal. So your white supremacist, when they go out here, and racist, what they want to do is make themselves to be the paragon and ideal of what society should be. And when they do that, they want to put Black people at the bottom and goths right above your Black people at the bottom of the world. So your white supremacists, they don't like goths. They usually beat up goths and they attack goths. So they are very cruel to goths. So white supremacists don't like goths at all. And that's something people need to understand, that you're racist and white supremacists. What they want to do is infiltrate the scene, and then they want to try to change the narrative of it so they can perpetuate stereotypes and promote stereotypes about the scene, where they try to push these ideas like goths are devil worshippers, goths are killers, goths are murderers, when in actuality, a lot of goth kids are just quiet kids who just want to be able to live their lives, and they want to be able to be in a place where they feel safe. And that's one of the things that has a lot of kids today not really going to clubs and places, is because they don't feel safe. And when you deal with an introvert, they need that feeling of safety in order to go out here and really socialize in places like clubs or coffee houses. They need that safety, and they need to be in a place where they feel comfortable. And that's another thing a lot of people who are older in the scene don't understand, is that the younger kids, they need that feeling of safety to feel like they can go out. And if they can get that feeling of safety and comfort, then they will go to that club on the regular. So that's something is also a part of bridging that goth generation gap, is getting people to understand that introverts, they need that feeling of safety if they want to be able to go to clubs, and they need to have an open and safe environment. Then they need an environment, especially those who are socially anxious, where there's not a lot of noise and a lot of lights. So because that triggers anxiety in people. So people have to really understand that, again, the way socially shy people approach places where it's different than your traditional person. A shy person, they will go to a place if it's safe. Like I remember when I was a kid, I used to go to the comic book store, and that was like a home to me. Like when I go to a place like a Forbidden Planet or a Jim Hanley's Universe, I could stay there for hours. And the same thing with people in the goth scene. If they can find a place that's comfortable, they will stay there for hours. And that's what a lot of goth clubs need to understand, is that you have to make it comfortable for people, and that's something you really need to understand. Black Sand, yeah, Nine Inch Nails was one of the big bands in the '90s. In the goth scene, it was also a big band in the industrial scene. Um, their music was really good. Luciano, I don't have a goth retailer. I just buy what I like, and that's one of the things kids have to understand, and people in the scene have to understand is that you just buy what you like, and it doesn't have to come from a goth retailer like a Hot Topic, because that's another thing that people have been learning about this whole commercialization process, is that they think that it's all about buying the clothes from Hot Topic or Killstar, and you don't need any of those clothes to be goth. You can buy whatever you want, and you can oftentimes make a better outfit with regular clothes than you would if you were to go out here and buy one of these Killstar Goth in a Box outfits. You'd be surprised, Hanawa, sir, when it comes down to people in the subculture. I've been talking to people online, and it may look like on the surface you have nothing in common, but as you get to know them, you'll start to see that you have a lot in common with a lot of people in the scene. And this is something people, when you're introverts, you oftentimes think that, oh, I don't have anything in common with this person. But as you start talking to this person and getting to know them, you start seeing that, oh, you do have something in common with this person, and you might be able to have a relationship with that person that is extremely close. And that was one of the things that, if you have a relationship with an introvert again, and guys start to get close, you're going to have a friend for life, and that person is going to be like a brother or a sister to you once you guys get close. And that's one of the things that is really great about having relationships with introverts, is once that person starts to trust you, you are going to be very close to them. But if you hurt them, you're going to have an enemy you wish you never had. Luciano, goths don't hate Marilyn Manson. Marilyn Manson is a lot of people, they have an issue with Marilyn Manson because people think Marilyn Manson is a goth band, but Marilyn Manson is a pop star. And yes, he's one of the popular musicians that some goths listen to, but the issue they have with him is that people they automatically run to him because they think that he's goth, and he promotes a goth stereotype. Oh, it's a Marilyn Manson, but he's a pop star. Supra, when it comes down to goth subculture, it varies from person to person, and not all goths worship Satan. I've run into Christian goths, I've run into Muslim goths, I've run into Jewish goths, I've run into agnostic goths. So different people, it varies from person to person what they believe in. I myself am a follower of God, so it varies from person to person, and it depends on what person you run into. And you just have to talk to people to find out what they're like and what they're about. So you can't generalize about religion, and as related to people in the goth scene, it just varies from person to person. Some people are into Wicca, some people are into other supernatural things, but it just varies from person to person. Look at the chat. I got about 8 more minutes, and then I'm going to wrap this one up. Okay. Okay. Don't see many more in the chat, so got about 7 minutes. But people have to, but again, when it comes down to shy people, they have to feel very safe with you. And the whole thing is that it takes time to feel safe. So that's something that people need to do. A law trader asks, How did I find goth? I knew about goth back in the late 80s. My first exposure to it was the 1988 movie Beetlejuice, when Winona Ryder was Lydia Dietz, and that was my first exposure to it. And as I grew up in the 90s, I saw a lot of um, Um, I saw a lot of different things like Jenny Jones. I saw people trying to push the stereotypes on those shows, and I knew about it. So I knew about it back then, and I knew about a lot of the things people were going through back then because I saw these talk shows that would make fun of goths, and I wasn't with that. And then when Columbine came along, they started pushing these stereotypes, and they didn't really talk about things, especially as related to the Black Goth scene. And I really had an issue with that because, again, I knew what was going on, but they didn't want to talk about it. But my first exposure, again, was 1988 when I went to the Whitestone Multiplex and I saw Beetlejuice with Winona Ryder as Lydia Dietz. And Lydia Dietz was one of the influences on the Matilda Crowley character. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do the character was to show that Black people were in the scene, and I also wanted to create a Black goth icon like Lydia Dietz or Nancy from The Craft or Wednesday Addams from the Addams Family movies, Christina Ricci. I wanted to do that for the Black brothers and sisters in here in the scene and create their goth icon so that they could have an icon just like the white characters and show that there are Black people in the scene, and we could have our own icons and tell our own stories in the scene. That was one of the things I want to do, and I still want to do Spinsterella stories after the trilogy, but I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do. I got an inspiration to do a story based on the Beetlejuice sequel they didn't produce called um, Beetlejuice's Hawaiian Vacation. I wanted to do Spinsterella's Summer Vacation. I'm still trying to work out what I want to do with that story. And thank you, Black Sand. I really appreciate the donation. Really, really appreciate it. And glad to see you come to the streams and donate. Really appreciate that. But I did this show because, again, I love the goth subculture. I want kids to grow in the scene, and one of the things that will help kids grow is dealing with being shy, dealing with being introverted, and dealing with social anxiety. Because one of the things that leads to people having social anxiety disorder, avoidant personality disorder, and mental health issues is that people wind up trying to force them to bully them into their shyness, or they try to do things to force them to not to deal with their struggles or understand their struggles. And that can drive a kid inward, and it will drive a person who's adult inward. And that's something that I want kids to work with and, develop on their own pace. And I want them to understand, that they're not alone in dealing with this, and that I've been dealing with this ever since I was a kid back in the 80s, 1980s, and I'm still dealing with it right now. And I've managed to make a lot of progress over the last decade or so. And that's I wanted to, talk about my story and my experience, and I wanted to hope to inspire other goths out there to persevere in trying to overcome shyness if they're shy, and be social with other people in the scene. And if they're introverts, try to find people who are like-minded. And if you're socially anxious, try to find ways to overcome that social anxiety, because there are a lot of people here in the scene who want to be friends with you, they want to be social with you, and they want to get to know you. And whether it be in a YouTube video or social media, you're still making steps towards moving forward, and you're making steps towards making progress. A law trader asked the question, can you be goth and not realize it? Yeah, that's called darkly inclined. When you have a dark view of the world and a dark understanding of it, And you can go from darkly inclined to being a goth, and that's a choice you have to choose. Goth rappers, I last time I am George, she talked about that, and I have to go do more research on it. But I think there might be some goth rappers out there. I wish there were more, but I think that they are out there. So um, it just the music is it's very diverse. It's just you have to go out here and do the research on it, and you have to go look for it. So a lot of people they go for the traditional music, the Susie and the Banshees, the Cure, Nine Inch Nails, and those traditional bands. But I would love to see more rappers coming into the scene and talking about things from a dark perspective. And I'd like to see more goth as related to black music. I mean, I did once a goth music mix in R&B a while back ago, darkly inclined goth music mix, and another goth YouTuber, Justin King, another black goth YouTuber, she did a video talking about goth themes in R&B and hip hop, and it's out there, but you just have to go look for it. And that's one of the things I want to do is help people go out here and look for it and find it. And I'm hoping that more people go out here and learn more about the goth subculture and the goth scene, especially the black goth subculture. That's something we desperately need to talk about, and we need to get more out there because so many brothers and sisters, they want to be a part of the scene, and so many people want to be in the scene, but because they have been bullied and harassed, and told again that they have to fit into the black box, that's what makes them introverted and withdrawn, and that's what makes them not want to go out here and be the person that they want to be. But I want to encourage people to be that they want to be and take those steps. And one of those steps is overcoming your shyness to move forward. I'm hoping everybody learns something about being an introvert and the goth subculture. And I'm hoping all the people in the scene will learn something about being shy and introverted. And I'm hoping that they learn that they're not alone. And that there are people out there who want to help them go out here and be the goth they want to be. Wall Trader asks, does goth have an age limit? No, it does not have an age limit. There are kids who are as young as 10 years old who are goth, and there are people who are as old as 60 and 70 who are goth, and they are all over. So there is no age limit to goth. You can be a goth at any age, and you can be a part of the scene at any age. And that's, again, something that a lot of people don't know. They think of goth as something that children do, but it's something that people, they have been doing since they were kids. And it's a lifestyle that for many people, and for others, it's a part of who they are. So you can be a goth at any age, at any time. I'm going to get ready to wrap this stream up because it's 12 midnight and I have to do something tomorrow. I really enjoyed spending time with you talking about introversion and the goth subculture and overcoming shyness, social anxiety, and introversion. And I thank you all for coming out here to spend time with me on the stream. If you want to learn more about Matilda Crowley's journey and how she overcame her shyness and social anxiety, you can pick up Spellbound in paperback or Kindle on Amazon.com. And you can pick up the legendary Mad Matilda in paperback and Kindle on Amazon.com. And this one is on Kindle Unlimited. And if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can read this one for free. Legendary Mad Matilda is on Kindle Unlimited. It's the second book in the trilogy. And you can pick up Spinsterella on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle Unlimited. I thank you all for spending time with me on tonight's live stream, and I'm hoping to do another one next week. And I hope you'll be there for that one because I want to do another Goth live stream, but it will probably be later on. But eventually, I'm going to do another Goth live stream in the future, and I hope you'll be there for that one.